Welcome in, one and all, to the Hoth Hangout podcast. I believe this is episode 9, I want to say, something like that. And we are
Who
covering
knows?
tonight the penultimate, the 11th out of the 12 episodes of the first season of Andor. It was a pretty good episode, and we're excited to discuss our thoughts on it. But first of all, before that, we want to welcome you, first of all, once again. And my name is Ben.
He's
And
Ben, I'm Joey, and
yeah,
this is Hoth Hangout.
it is
Welcome in.
indeed. Um, and first of all, I want to issue a small apology that this is coming out on a Friday rather than a Thursday. That is completely my fault, and I will take the blame for that. But we're here. We're excited to talk about this most recent episode. But before we dive into the nitty gritty details of the episode, we have a fun uh, almost a. I mean, we're a fan here of the kind of the out there Star Wars theories, if you will. Hashtag make Kino the Snoke origin story. Um, we do have a viewer submitted. Not so much necessarily. I mean, there's kind of a question posed with it, but it's almost more of a what are our thoughts on if this theory were to happen sort of thing. And so this was submitted by Dev Relevant, and it's actually it's a pretty fascinating, a little bit out there theory, but it's a fun one. So we figured we'd start the episode off with that, and we'd get our thoughts and reactions to it. Dev says, finally got to listen to the most recent Andor podcast. Always love hearing what you both have to say, which also sparks new thoughts for me about the show. So thank you. Probably a bit of a reach, but what do you think the chances are that Deidre could be Cassian's long-lost sister? The show has drawn a lot of inspiration from other Star Wars movies, and this would certainly provide a I am your father type of moment. On top of Cassian being one of the leaders in the whole prison escape, what if Marva passes along with him, finding out that the Empire has completely corrupted his sister? Could this end up being the case, which I'm not sure how they would even find out, but I think that would finally have Cassian unconditionally invested in the rebellion as a cause worth dying for. Again, probably not a realistic guess, but when it crossed my mind, I thought it would tie some things up in the show rather nicely, so I wanted to share it with you anyways. Quite a cool theory. Thank you, Dev, first of all, for submitting that to us. And what are your initial thoughts? Like, I mean, he said it himself. It's kind of a wild out there idea and theory, but
Listen, these are the theories I'm here for. Just the out of the box, never even thought of it type of thing. I honestly, up until this point, we have never mentioned this possibility. Out of how many hours of this show that we've watched and that you and I have talked about, whether on the podcast or off. So to have something come out of left field like this, I love it. But to what he's saying, here are some things to think about, right? There has been zero talk about the sister ever since a couple episodes. They made it that was the first task that Cassian was doing entering this series, right? Maybe it made mention of it a couple of times since then, but for the most part, we don't hear about it again. Realistically, maybe not a great theory, but at the end, but the idea of it being her, I mean, would completely blindside us,
yeah.
and it would bring it back full circle. If somehow at the end of this season, that's what we determine, or sometime in the middle of the second season, we figure that out, then we'll be like, well, okay, at least they. One thing I hated about Lost was
It all comes back to Lost. Every show does.
was all the loose ends that never got, tied up. So, and even if it's an unsatisfactory ending, at least you finish that thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if that ends up being the case with Miro, then so be it. Do I think it's going to be it? I don't think it's going to be it. But I enjoy the enthusiasm, and thank you, Dev, for the message.
Hey, and Dev and anyone else, keep the wild like
Yeah.
theories coming. I I enjoyed reading it, and getting a chance to think about it and respond to it. I'm kind of on the same page as you though. I would be absolutely like whatever a step beyond shocked is if they go that direction
Yeah.
with Miro's character. But for a show that really hasn't done anything like most great movies. I mean, Empire Strikes Back is probably the best example in cinema history of the moment where it's like, "What? You're kidding me!"
Hmm.
Like
Right.
we
Hmm.
have not had that moment in this show, or anything close to that. I mean, like you could argue, like finding out Vel is Mon Mothma's cousin,
Yeah.
or some smaller things here and there, like the prisoners aren't actually going to be able to leave the prison, but
Hmm. Right.
nothing near scale of like, oh my gosh, Darth Vader's my father.
Right.
uh
Yeah.
but I mean, Miro being uh Andor's sister, which again, I don't think that's going to be the direction they take, but that would definitely be the most I am your father moment.
Right.
But
But yeah. Thanks for the message. Keep them coming.
yeah,
Dev has sent me messages here and there regarding the show. He's a big fan of the show and of course of the podcast. So thanks, Dev, for the message.
thanks, Dev. um Jumping or shifting gears and jumping more so into the episode itself, episode 11. Um, it was, I thought, a pretty good episode overall. I don't know. It very much felt like the ball was being placed on the tee. The club is being wound up, and now we're just waiting to see what the swing will look like in episode 12. Pardon my golf analogy, but that was kind of how I felt about episode 11. It didn't really feel like a ton of consequential things happened. It was more so setting up for what we would anticipate will be a pretty, hopefully, epic final episode of the first season. And that's not to say that there weren't important points in this episode too. Like the first one, which we find out relatively close to the beginning of the episode, is that Marva has now passed away, which was, you know, I appreciate the fact that droids are in Star Wars, but I've never been one of those people that's like super emotionally invested in R2 or C3PO. I love them as characters, but like, you know,
Mhm.
I've never been super emotionally invested in the droids. But this droid in this show, like, is so sad. Like watching him,
Yeah.
in the room, like, I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
It's like the most sad I've ever felt for a droid in Star Wars.
Yeah, and this is probably the first time I've seen, and I'm trying to think if this is a true statement, but the first time, well, one that I cared like in this way, like empathy, or I felt sad for a droid, but also the characters around the droid really know, and I forget the one character's name that was there in the beginning, and they came back, and he
Yes.
stayed over.
Bix's
Um,
friend.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So he wanted to make sure that B2EMO,
Which is
love the name,
the funniest acronym they could have chosen. Like the most applicable one too.
yeah, made sure that BT I'm going to say it, is okay, and if and even said, we can clear everybody out so you could say goodbye to her, that those types of statements to somebody you would normally say to a person, not a droid, right? And yeah, so there was an emotional time for to see that. I mean, to know how important the character Marva was. Part of me feels like it was kind of cheap on how she just, all right, she's not here anymore, and
Yeah,
you know, and I don't know what to make of that yet. I'm almost, this we're fast forwarding a little bit here, but I'm almost waiting for the funeral in the next episode, a Harry Potter moment. She jumps out of the thing, and she has blaster rifles. She's shooting all the stormtroopers. That's like how it. I mean, because you didn't see anything happen. The last time you saw, she was sick, and now she's just not. She's not anymore.
yeah.
So I just thought it was a kind of a interesting choice to do it that way. I wonder if that there's a reason behind it though.
Yeah, that is kind of a good point to make. And I think we would expect with most characters, particularly ones that are invested in the relationship to the main character of the show, if we want to call Cassian the main character, that's another argument we could have. Um,
Yeah.
but you would expect them to give a send off to that character that is, uh, you know, emotionally investing, kind of like how B2 emo feels about Marva. Like, I don't think we as the audience have quite that same connection to her. Um, I don't know. I felt obviously sad about it. And also, aside from that fact, Cassian doesn't know. And so, like at this point, he's just escaped Narkina 5. And he doesn't even know that this has happened, and he doesn't know that they're going to end up using her funeral as sort of this trying to trap him in and lure him back to capture him.
Well, at the end of the episode, are you talking about like
No,
early
no,
on in the
yeah,
episode?
I'm saying like at
Okay.
this point in time, he
Okay.
doesn't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so the fact that she has like passed away and Cassian
Mhm.
doesn't know at this point also creates this sense of empathy as well. You're like, oh, like her
Yeah.
son doesn't
Right.
even know that this has happened.
Right.
Of course, like you said, of course he finds out, but not until later in the episode. So, um, yeah, just kind of a lot to digest there, and then additionally at the same time, Bix we see is just like she ain't looking good.
Looking good. I mean, and as much hope as we had of that character early on, wow, this is not where we had hoped where she would be by the end of the season for sure. Maybe this is the development of her character. Next season is where she really finds her footing within the rebellion. But yeah, at this point, I mean, you could tell she's been through. I don't know if she actually had a line in this episode other than her just
I don't think
being
so.
completely shocked and great acting by the actress that plays
Yeah.
her. Um, because she has been tortured so much, in fact, that she can no longer speak. I don't know if that is that's the intention, but that appears to be what has happened to her at this point.
Yeah, and it kind of leaves off with the implication that she's either about to like give up that information that the Empire has been trying to go after. That's kind of the direction it leads you to think.
Hmm.
But there's also the chance that she could have continued to withhold the information. So
Hmm.
I'm hoping we kind of see, and this is something we could discuss this episode too, and we will definitely be discussing next episode.
Yeah.
But we could kind of discuss what we think Ix's standing will be in the overall scheme of the show, and more so as it relates to the rebellion as a whole. Because I can guarantee that being tortured by the Empire is definitely reason enough to want to go full force into this rebellion thing at the end of season one. I would imagine.
Hmm. Right, and it's a good time to mention. The question that they were asking here this time around was the the person that she had introduced to Cassian. If it was indeed, is it Anton Krieger? Is that
Mhm.
the name that we have?
Yeah, and I think we get to see
Yes,
him visually for the first time this
yes,
episode.
right. Oddly enough, that's what I thought he looked like. I don't know
Really?
why. That was the picture. That was the kind of person I was expecting
Huh.
when they said Anton Krieger. I don't know why, but that was very similar to my mind's eye and what he would look like.
I don't.
So I don't know if I'm just really good at Star Wars or
You have ascended to the next level of Star Wars fandom,
exactly.
predicting the
Yeah.
character physical attributes.
But yeah, so they're looking if she had introduced him to Andor, but as we know, it was Luthen
Hmm.
that was the one that was with Andor there on Ferrix, where they first met. So and leads me to believe that I mean, although they are getting some of the right people, and like Krieger is obviously somebody who's on their radar, and it sounds like he is part of everything that's going on. But still, Luthen is not on anybody's radar. It sounds like at this point, where it is, and because I know the code name they gave this entity, this person, was Axis, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and we kind of mentioned it before: is Axis an actual person? Is it a network of people who are trying to, lead this rebellion or fund and source it? So, it's so they're almost so part of me is like, oh well, the Empire is on the right track, but the fact that Luthen isn't even in the picture right now or on their radar is pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, he does always kind of seem one step ahead. Although I will say, he feels, even though he's not on the radar, he feels a lot closer to being on it now than he did at the beginning of the show.
Hmm.
And ultimately, a lot of, I think that closeness to being on the radar is where we kind of get probably the main central plot point of this episode is this moral
Hmm.
dilemma that is being kind of put forth by Luthen to Saw. He's not even really giving him an option. Really, he's saying like
Yeah,
we should just let them.
leave him. Yeah,
Yeah, we should let them. Fall into the trap and presumably these 30 men and I guess technically 31. They were saying with Krieger.
plus Krieger. Yep, he
Um,
kept saying that. Yep.
yeah, which was odd that they kept. I think they said it multiple times. I was like, it's kind of
They definitely said it twice.
yeah,
I don't know if it was to just emphasize, um,
like
I
around.
mean, because
Yeah, it was
30
weird.
is a big number. 30 is a big number
Yeah,
of people, right? Um, but yeah, it was they wanted that emphasis for some reason. I don't know if it's just
yeah.
Luthen kind of just being kind of a jerk. It's like plus like don't forget him or you know what I mean. So
There'll be a scene next episode where it's like, "There's only 30 of you. Where's the
yeah,
31st person?" And they just wanted to like really
exactly.
cement that number in your head during the
Right.
previous
Yeah.
episode. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, this is kind of a major dilemma. And Saw of all people, who's considered an extremist, um, by people on both sides, is kind of saying you're gonna like, and he has no real affection for Krieger either. But
Right.
he's the one being like the moral source of questioning or goodness here. Like, are you
Hmm.
sure we should just like let them die?
Hmm.
Which says something I think about Saw, that he's not this completely like heartless killer that I think a lot
Right.
of the his enemies would portray him to be.
Right. And I think, and I want your thoughts on this. There's a point where Saw gets real Saw about it and starts getting paranoid.
Hmm.
Right. And he says, "You got people on the ISB. You got people over here. Who do you have? Who do you have in my camp? You know."
Yeah,
And then Luthen points to tubes, two
yeah.
tubes, and he's like, "I got tubes." Is that true? Does Luthen actually, or is that a way of manipulating Saw into focusing up on the task at hand?
Is Tubes a spy for Luthen? I highly doubt it. I think that was just a ploy, to kind of get the weapon. But like you
Hmm.
said, I think it also probably even more so than actually getting the blaster that he steals from Tubes to almost like prove a point to Saw. More so than that, I think it's just this idea of implanting in Saw's mind that Luthen has power because he has people in so many places.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, episode by episode, I get more and more. I'm not sure if it's in awe of Luthen or scared of him
yeah,
because some of the conversations he's had. I mean, the last episode when he had this whole practical manifesto of what it means to be lonely and sacrifice, and to have all of that, and then we go into this one. We already know going into this that he is ready to just sacrifice Krieger and his 30 men.
hmm
Um, and part of me, and this might be going on a tangent a little bit. Part of me wonders if we'll ever see Krieger ever. in the show.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a
Just to,
yeah.
just to just to separate us completely from that character. That was always just an entity that was meant to just be sacrificed and never to have a connection with it. Just curious anyway. But like I was talking about Luthen, Luthen is always, like you said, one step ahead. And it's interesting that the Empire has, at this point, doesn't seem like they have him on his radar. And even the people on the rebellion side seem to not know everything about him either. Whether it's Saw, Mon Mothma, uh, the only person that I would say would be his peer assistant. I'm not quite sure what you call her, Clea.
Hmm.
Would be the only one that seems to have some type of idea of what the goings on of Luthen himself.
Yeah, yeah. Great scene with her and Vel in this episode. I think it was relatively close to the beginning, but Vel is basically she's trying to be like, we have to talk in code or what. I don't That wasn't what she said, but more or less she
Yeah,
was
yeah,
trying to, you have to be more subtle with what you're saying, and Vel's
yeah.
basically like,
Right,
I'm tired of being subtle, like,
right. Yeah.
you know.
And can I say I'm dumb for a second? Because I did not realize a couple episodes ago when Vel met with somebody in the middle of Coruscant that was Clea. I did not
Oh
even.
yeah, I didn't either.
Okay, because I went back to that and I'm like, is that, wait, hold on. Because it didn't make any sense to me that these two were interacting in this scene. Because I'm like,
And
I mean,
did they know
it
each
makes
other?
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the way they were talking to each other, it seemed like there was type of rapport, relationship there already. And I'm like, wait, is that the same woman that met in Coruscant episodes ago? And I did not realize it. I went back and I looked. It was Clea. I'm pretty sure that was Clea. You know what scene I'm talking about?
Yeah, I
Like
think it was
shortly
either,
after shortly after the Aldani
yeah.
raid.
I think it was episode 7, I want to say.
Yeah, 7. It
Uh
was 7.
and yeah, I mean, I recall us talking about that, being like, who was that woman Vel was meeting with? And so I don't know
It's
if
great.
maybe we just weren't as familiar with her yet, or like
Yeah,
we
I don't know. I'm so dumb.
but
I
that
will openly admit it right here, but I just had no
no, I'm with you. I mean,
idea.
that scene makes so much more sense now, knowing uh that it is Clea, right? Is her name? Um, knowing that it's her, because
Because
before,
if you remember the conversation, a lot of it was Vel saying, "I can't believe he's not here."
right?
So he probably being Luthen,
Yeah,
and I'm like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, okay, that makes sense now. So
yeah.
aha moment of the day today.
One scene that we kind of glanced over, which didn't have like a ton of pertinence to the plot necessarily, but was the very, very
Mhm,
beginning.
mhm.
Do you know which one did you think I was gonna say? The one with the aliens or something different?
No, the one with our best friend, uh, the our favorite character of the entire series, Karn. I thought I'm gonna bring
Oh,
up that one.
yeah. I mean, maybe I purposely forgot about that one. uh,
No, but that you're talking about the very beginning.
yeah, like the very, very
Um,
beginning with Cassian and Melshi, as they've just escaped Narkina 5. And there's these. I don't think we've ever seen this species of alien in Star Wars, at least that I can think of. But uh, just, I mean, there not a whole lot of like in depthness to it. But what did you think
mm-mm.
of that scene?
So I remember, and I think this was the same director that did episode 7, right?
Yeah.
That's what we determined.
Yep.
And I believe episode 7 was where I was like, what is happening here? I felt again like what is I mean, it's very Star Wars. You introducing new aliens from planets that you've never seen. So Narkina 5 is, I think that's where they're at right now.
Mm.
So if you're watching with the subtitles on, it does say speaking in Narkinian, or however the proper way to say that. So they have the native
Sounds right.
residents of that planet. Pretty cool. Um, didn't seem like we needed all of that, because I mean, all we know, all we got from it. There's two of them. that I don't know exactly what they were doing, where they were. They were just hanging out, and for
Yeah,
some reason they had this fishing net made of slime that they just catch people. And I don't know if that was maybe that's what they do specifically to catch prisoners who were trying to escape. But I can't imagine that being a thing because I'm pretty sure this is the first time anyone's ever escaped from that prison.
yeah,
And they were complaining about how they were polluting the water and all the fish and or I forgot what they called it. Um, they were all dying because of the prison using up polluting everything, whatever. And then because they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna get 1,000 for each of these guys. Ultimately, to just be like, you can go ahead and go. It just
yeah.
what was this? What was all that about?
Yeah, it didn't. I mean, I think the scene was honestly kind of an excuse to just throw aliens in because, hey, it's Star Wars.
Right.
Which I feel like they could have done it in a way, or even in a different episode, which was like, uh, made more sense. Which, speaking of, like, we haven't really had any in the show that, like, that, not really, of prominence. If
Any new ones, especially any
and
new ones. I mean,
Yeah, that's what
yeah,
I mean.
it's
Yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah. I mean, they're. You're talking about a universe. I mean, on Coruscant, you should be able to find a ton. Those,
yeah,
especially
or
those
we're in the prison, which these
in
inmates
the prison.
supposedly
Yeah,
came
right.
from
Yeah,
everywhere. Like it seemed like
yeah.
they were
Those
all
prison. Yeah,
humans.
yeah. So it was very something that did not feel very Star. It has not felt very Star Wars is the lack of the aliens pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. Although I will say this episode was probably the most like Star Warsy episode, maybe of the
Oh,
whole show.
definitely. I
Um,
would I would absolutely agree.
yeah, and there's specifically another episode, another scene at the end of the episode that obviously is the reason we're saying that primarily. Um,
Right.
but particular, also this episode or this I keep saying episode, the scene at the beginning of the episode with the two Narkinians, if that's how we're going with the pronunciation of, just kind of being like, first of all, you set up a net, to like guard your ship, okay, I guess, and then you kind of like taunt them and you say, it's your fault for all this and blah blah blah, but ultimately, like, I guess they just don't like the Empire more than they want to see them go free. So it's like, okay, and then they just like take them where they asked to go. It was,
Yeah, yeah, right. So again, the some of the decisions here once again just made me just kind of raise an eyebrow to what was even going on. They end up going back to that I don't know what else to call it, a resort planet. I don't know where I think it was called what was it called? Niomis or something like
yeah,
that.
yep, that sounds right.
Niomis. They end up going back there for Cassian to go back to the villa he was at and get that I didn't get either. I'm like, how is that still there? It looks like people had moved in, or there were some people already there.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was a hotel resort where people and he just hid it really well, but I mean, it looked like it was in plain sight the way he just had to climb up a
on that
thing and
top
then it was on
shelf.
top there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't see up there.
You
Can't see
know
up
what
there.
was
And,
so
it's
funny as I
impossible.
was watching that scene? I had to go back and watch like that 5 minute clip from the, I think it was it the first episode or the second. It was early on when he hides it originally. Because
Mhm.
I'm sitting there watching that scene in the most recent episode. And I'm like, I have like, why do I feel like I've seen this before?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like
right.
I vaguely even remembered that he had hit it there.
Yeah,
And so I was like, oh, okay, because that's, he came back for it. Um,
right.
yeah, kind of, I don't know. The Cassian storyline this episode wasn't didn't didn't do much for me, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the emphasis was it was a game of telephone.
Mhm.
Everyone had found out that Marva died and was telling everyone. Like he's gonna, Karn found out. Who else found out? Obviously, Mura found out. Cassian himself found out. I mean, that this was the episode that everybody found out about Marva passing away. And and may I add the ritual that they have on Ferrix there
Mhm.
with the people who have passed
They called
along.
it bricking, I think.
Yeah, first off, I don't like the name of it. 'Cause I'm like, wait, did they throw bricks at her body? Just that it was a very weird thing. But essentially, they end up being a part of the infrastructure
Right.
of Ferrix, which I thought had a lot of symbolism.
Definitely.
I mean, not even symbolism. I mean, actual. They are actually a part of
Yeah.
the land now. But yeah, so it sounds like as part of their ritual and the status that Marva had on there with that planet, that there's something that they'll plan out in 2 days, and once again we have to wait for something like that, like just when we were waiting for the Aldani raid. We had to wait 5 days for that. Now we got to wait 2 days for this, and I mean, obviously this being the second to last episode of the season, we know what we're gonna get now on the 12th and final episode. Would probably be, maybe we'll talk about that a little later, but yeah, most likely be the funeral and
Yeah.
what all that happens.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty clear that this whole episode is setting up um Cassian's return to Ferrix, and he's probably gonna come, and like he's gonna see like Bix is probably gonna be used as bait in some way, and Karn's gonna be in on it as well, and Miro's gonna be like, Karn, why are you here? I told you not. And he's like, I'm trying to impress you because blah 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 blah. Because I'm Karn and I'm a
I,
baby.
for, I forgot about that weird scene that they had together.
Yeah, I'm blocking that scene out of my memory still, but yeah, I mean, I liked the episode. Probably I don't know. This is weird to say, but I am more invested in Luthen, I think,
Oh yeah.
than Andor. I don't know. I go back and forth. Like I was kind of low on Andor, like not the show, the character. After like episode 6, not 6, 7, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
then the prison stuff
In
happened,
the prison stuff, yeah.
and you're like, okay, like here we go. Like Cassian's kind of like he's grabbing the reins of the show. I care more about his character. And I feel like he took a tiny step backwards this episode. Just like I feel like they were kind of just like stringing him along so that he could eventually find out, rather than giving him like a substantial plot in this episode, which is fine, I guess. It's this was a very much a setup episode for the finale, but yeah, like I said, the Luthen stuff is more intriguing to me at this point. I want to know more about this spy he has in the ISB. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Luthen, whether he was being tongue in cheek or whether he actually does have people everywhere, including with Saw's group or even with, um, I don't think he would have it with Krieger's group, but who knows,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm more interested in Luthen and particularly Mon Mothma. I want to see this transformation, or I want to see them have to go through this tough decision of like, okay, now people know we're involved, and how
Right.
which we're probably not going to get this season, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
um, like I want to reach that point in the show where Luthen and Mon Mothma are like the faces of this thing, or even Andor to some extent. But um, sorry, not to ramble too much, but
No, no, and
I like the Luthen stuff this episode.
yeah, and I mean, Mon Mothma's involvement in this particular episode was really to emphasize once again the trouble that she, how close the ISB or the Empire are to finding out how involved she potentially could be in with any rebellion activity.
Hmm.
Vel comes over once again and seems like unannounced this time. Kind of walks in and has a discussion with her, and you could really see the God Genevieve O'Reilly, such a good actress. You could really see the worry and um in Mon Mothma in just that conversation alone, because she knows she's in trouble, and now her daughter seems to be starting up with the Chandrilian um, traditions. That's what I don't know if that's what you read from it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, so it's and with that would be the kind of arranged marriages. Uh, Maybe that's actually on the table now with the person from last episode. Don't remember his name. Davo, right? Was that Davo?
Yeah, the banker or the scummy
Yeah,
banker, I guess, if you
yeah, the
want to call
scummy
him.
maker, right? Yeah. So it looks like she is, and she made it seem like that was a decision from her daughter, to kind of go back and live out some traditions that back on their home planet to bring them here to Coruscant. And was it like, and I said one can assume that that would include the arranged marriages. And yeah, and it kind of being out of Mon Mothma's hands. Like, this is, I have nothing. This is from all fronts. She's kind of losing control. Where maybe, and on the flip side, you see Luthen is very much in control of the situation he's in. So much to the fact that he's making Saw think that that it's up to him, this whole thing, when he already knows that Saw's not going to be um helping out Krieger, only to get massacred with Krieger and his 30 men.
Hmm.
So um but yeah, I would love to see, and I think just throughout this entire series, we're both more and more interested in these characters that were supposed to be more supporting roles. Well, that's what I would have thought. Really becoming more fully developed throughout the rest of the season. I mean, you think of Mon Mothma, you think of Luthen, and you think about their storylines, their story arcs, and how much they have grown from episode 1 to now. Compare that to what you've seen in Andor. It's very much a peak and valley type of thing where you're just like, where. I mean, you name something after a particular character, you would think that that's the main line that you would kind of see throughout the whole thing. But we've learned from this series and episode and series like Boba Fett, where it's not necessarily the case, which is a shame. I like Diego Luna a lot. I want his character. I want more for his character, if I'm being honest. But maybe it's not linear. Maybe it's not something that's supposed to be from A to B and it's supposed to be a straight line. Maybe it does take this road, and I hope by the end of either this season or next season we really get that payoff.
Yeah, yeah. I had two thoughts on just going off of what you were saying. The first one is that it makes me nervous for Ahsoka because this is the second live action Star Wars show in a row, the first being Boba Fett, where it doesn't feel like the title character is really, yeah, and Andor probably more so than Boba Fett. I think there was actually serious effort, at least with the first half of Boba Fett, to make him like the main point of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they would do this with Ahsoka, but I am like slightly worried that they'll try to focus too
Right. Yeah.
much on other characters in that show.
Right. Yeah.
And I just I hope that's not the case. And my gut tells me it's not, but this show has kind of put that worry in the back
Of
of my
course.
mind. Um, and then the second thought I had more relating to Mon Mothma actually. You mentioned that the well, first of all, her daughter, like being more invested with her friends or whoever those other girls were, in the Chandrila customs or ways, doesn't necessarily feel like it's her caring about the customs. It's probably just kind of despite her mother. If
True.
we're being completely honest. But also you mentioned that she being Mon Mothma, that the arranged marriage thing is now on the table. I don't really, as much as she hated the fact that that was brought up, I don't think it was ever off the table. Um, and I think ultimately
Right.
that is going to be, and we're not even talking arranged marriage really. We're just talking about like the introduction of creepy banker guy's son uh to Mon Mothma's daughter, which I think that's something in terms of the plot. It's going to serve as an example, or not an example, but kind of this sacrifice that is not you know, huge in the scheme of things. I guess to Mon Mothma it could be, but like it's an example of this first step, even though
Right.
she, maybe more than first, but this step that Mon Mothma is having to give something up, this time something personal to her, like her daughter, and like, you know, potentially like her daughter's marriage, for the greater good, or for the rebellion as a whole. So I think that's more so what that plot line is going to more or less end up being, is that she's going to have to sacrifice a relationship with her daughter, which she kind of already has, um, for the rebellion to be truly successful. Is where I think they're going with that storyline.
It's hard not to make that assumption, right? I mean, just the way they framed everything, and even in the last episode when Mon Mothma and creepy banker Davo left that conversation, he even said that's the first time you lied in this entire time,
Yeah.
So kind of what you said last episode when we talked about it. So yeah, I mean, maybe that's the more accurate thing to say would be, yeah, it was never off the table. And as much as she may not want it to happen, maybe that is the play that needs to happen in order for her to, I mean, eventually, essentially delay the Empire, no, because we know at some point they know
Yeah.
who she is and what she does for them. So to essentially delay um, that knowledge being known by the Empire, that she's full on board with the rebellion. Um, but even that story alone is more captivating than what we've seen with Andor. And I want to just mention with what you've said, Ahsoka. One difference that I'll have to say regarding Ahsoka in comparison to Boba Fett and to Andor himself is that Boba Fett and Andor didn't have any story. you know, as far as whatever happened to Boba Fett after Return of the Jedi, whatever happened to Cassian after Return of the Jedi, whatever happened to Cassian before Rogue One. So these stories are, we don't know characters, we don't know anything about what has happened to them in that time. We know a lot about Ahsoka at this point.
Hmm.
Um, so you, that character by herself can definitely carry a series.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that that's not what they're going to do or what they are going to do, but I'm hoping the fact that Ahsoka has this character, her arc, and I forget where we are in time for her series, but we know this character, we know the people who have helped her, the rebels, the Clone Wars, now Luke, and now we have Grogu and the Mandalorian. So we have these other characters who have honestly been are ready to develop for us as well. You know, we already know who all these characters are: the Sabine Wrens, the Harrison Dulas, the Anakin Skywalker. I mean, her supporting characters are people that we know. You know what I mean? So,
Hmm.
whereas when we're talking about Andor, we never knew about Luthen. We that was never a name we knew. On Mothma, we know kind of, but Bix and all these people. So you definitely have to develop everything around them as well
Yeah.
as you're going along with the series. Whereas Ahsoka, again, I don't know the timeline again, I forget, but the people that have been supporting roles in her life are people that we already know. So I'm hoping that that's not where we're going to get, where Ahsoka has 8 minutes of 40 minutes of screen time
Yeah.
per episode.
Which is what it felt like with Andor, with episode 11 for this for this show. Um, I think part of the reason that and not to talk too much about Ahsoka, I think this kind of just shows how excited we
It's
are
it's
for
hard
the
it's hard
show.
not to it's hard not to talk about. It's Ahsoka. We're
Yeah.
not. If you bring it up, we'll go into a 15-minute thing about it. It's fine.
Yeah. I think part of the reason it makes me nervous is that a lot of the Ahsoka plot will be post Mando season 2. So this is like
All right.
however many years after Return of the Jedi. And so part of the fact that a lot of the existing Ahsoka knowledge we have, primarily, or first would be like Clone Wars era, and then obviously the Rebels era stuff as well. Um, I feel like they'll try to take. I mean, clearly there'll be characters who we're familiar with who are a part of that show too, but I think they're going to take a similar approach that they did with Andor of introducing brand new characters. I feel like that's
Oh, I mean,
something
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
that Disney really focuses on since they've made the acquisition of Star Wars, and so I'm prepared for that. But like you said, I hope they don't hope they don't. I want Ahsoka to be on my screen for like 75 at least percent of the episodes in that show. So
Yeah,
um,
I would agree, and I I think they're smart enough to know what they've got with the Ahsoka brand.
I don't
You
know.
know,
They I don't even know if they did knew with the Obi-Wan, and they definitely didn't with Boba Fett.
yeah, that's what the Boba Fett one really shocks me because this is something that people have wanted since the 80s. How?
How do
Yeah,
you
that
mess it
was
up that
shocking to
bad?
me.
Well, and the
Yeah.
other like frustrating piece about Boba Fett was not how much like they kind of changed his character motivations, but how um like 5 episodes in, it was like it was like a kid who had gone off to college and then like had finished school, and rather than moving out and experiencing the world, aka like having this brand new show and just letting it be what it is, the kid's like, oh, let me go back home and live with my parents. It's like, let me just make it the Mandalorian.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
like reverting back to this, like, oh, let's play it safe, let's just
Yeah, yeah.
let's
You had and was it like for two episodes? It felt like for two episodes, like we just there was no Boba Fett or something like that. Yeah, and
it
that shocked me. As much as I've never been a huge Boba Fett fan, I will let's put that out there first. I understand that there's a whole side of the fandom that was really really ready for this series,
that
and I
surprises
wanted to
me that
be.
you're not a Boba Fett fan.
Oh, really? No,
Yeah.
I was. I mean, I thought he was cool. He had the cool armor, and the whole Mandalorian lore was has always intrigued me. But I never really got on. But I was much more Luke and his green lightsaber kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where my Star Wars was. Um, but yeah, I mean, as like not that I wasn't a fan of Boba Fett, but I was nowhere near a fan of Boba Fett that I've seen other people be. So, for this to be the Boba Fett that has come out of it all, yeah, I can't imagine them being too happy about it. And I feel like you had so much time to get this right. You had so much time to figure out what we needed to get with this character, and it just totally whiffed.
We should during the month of December, by the way, we're going to be putting out a bunch of um different episodes in terms of we're not going to be directly covering new content of Star Wars coming out, mainly because there won't be any during the month of December. But these are all like things that Joey and I just like love bouncing off of each other when it comes to Star
Right.
Wars, like our thoughts on all these recent shows. So, having
This is a sneak preview of the month
yeah,
of December, is what we
yeah.
say.
Also, if you have any particular like, if you want to see us do like a breakdown of episode 3, or like talk about
9.
9, yeah, or talk about like a specific scene in Rebels, or like anything Star Wars related, if you have a question or a particular thing you want us to cover in a December episode of the podcast, let us know. And we've already got a couple ideas in mind, but we're definitely open and welcoming of any ideas if you would like to share those with us. But yeah, having said all that, um, I feel like we diverted from
A
Andor a little
little bit.
bit. um,
I mean, it was in the same. We were talking about characters actually being in the shows that they're named after. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
appropriate.
I'm trying to think if there was anything like super consequential that we haven't talked about yet. The thing we kind of glanced over was I mean, not not super consequential, but Karn getting that call from Sergeant Mosk, telling him like Marva had died, and so we can assume, like we said, Karn is going to be uh gonna be
Showing up again.
gonna be showing up again, and he's gonna be trying to impress Miro. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yes. And he's gonna be like, Andor's gonna be here, and she's like, I know. Of course I know that. That's why I'm here, you know? Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about his character and how annoying it's become now at this point, where it's just like it's almost a meme at this point. You're just like, oh well, where's he gonna end up now? You know, he's the Where's Waldo of Star Wars, the Andor series,
um,
and
I
it's too bad. It's too bad. Those first 3 episodes, I was really waiting to hate him for different reasons, but now this is the reason why, because it's just now he's just that little brother that you cannot get away from.
I had another random thought, more like theory stuff. So,
Mm,
if we have anything else in regards to the episode itself, I'd probably prefer to wrap up that before I throw out some theory stuff at you.
yeah, that's fine.
But did you have any like final thoughts on perhaps the direction that the episode is leading us as we're heading into the finale next week?
I mean, we're definitely everyone's gonna end up on Ferrex. That's what I gather from this episode. Everyone and their mother will be there at this funeral, either monitoring it or participating in it or being bait for it, or so that everyone is gonna be on back on Ferrex. Um, the Emperor, will the Emperor be there too? I have no idea. Like it just seems like, because we did mention early on, we definitely they dangled that in front of us. They dangled the Emperor in front of us,
Yeah.
Palpatine, and that has not come to fruition yet. Doesn't mean it won't be in season 2 or end of this season, whatever. But yeah, we're still waiting for that payoff. But yeah, something's going down there. Everyone's gonna know. Oh, one thing I forgot that we didn't mention really was the call between, well, the ending scenes with Luthen. So
Hmm.
he had a call with Clea regarding something like a deal that wasn't going through. It was very cryptic. I had no idea. I watched it 3 times and I'm still like, who or what were they talking about? Because it seemed like there was an entity, a resource of someone, obviously, that is not going to be part of their mission or their, whatever that they're doing. Um, and I believe what Clea said, that there are other buyers, trying to get at this resource or whatever. Um, so that kind of intrigued me because obviously they're speaking in code because they can't specifically say what they're talking about. Um, yeah, so I have no idea what that was even about.
One other thing I just forgot, we referenced it earlier in the podcast and haven't talked about it. Was the most Star Warsy scene
Yes.
uh probably of the show so far, and kind of getting this, well, first of all, this kind of funny funny back and forth between Luthen when he's almost captured by a star destroyer, or a it it had a special name. It was a,
You did, yeah.
gosh, I wish I could remember, but I found out later after the episode that the type of ship that was, or the type of cruiser that was designed off an original concept art for what the Star Destroyer should look like.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and so, and oh, I read this in an article, but the name of this particular type with the 3 tractor beams on it, in the show they name it after the concept artist who drew this back in like 1976 or whatever. So
Wow.
it was kind of a cool homage.
I like when they do that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But within the scene, like Luthen, kind of trying to talk them down. They're not really buying it. He releases some like wicked looking missile things that take out the tractor beam, and then ensues like this dogfight between some ties and his ship. That was, and then dude, the lasers that popped out of his ship. I was like,
I was
Okay,
not.
I guess that's a thing now.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm like, this is the first we've seen this technology and this strategy. This is amazing. Of course, you always want to have something new when you bring in dogfights like that, because we've seen the usual things, the hard braking, let the TIE fighters go by, you shoot them from behind, whatever. You see the usual things, but yeah, something like that. Um, yeah, that was very satisfying to watch, and um, yeah, and I don't know if you caught it, but they did, when he was trying to negotiate his way out of it, he was able to make it seem like they were from Alderaan, so they kind of threw that in there,
Yeah.
just as a little thing for us to know what Alderaan's all about.
And another interesting
R.I.P. R.I.P.
RIP. Not yet RIP though.
Oh, true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right, right.
Another interesting point about that just small thing is even within that scene there's this evidence that Luthen has not only like his spies in places, but he has access to like, probably pretty scarce methods of trying to get past the Empire. He's like, oh great, and like within a couple seconds he has like the coordinates or the
Right,
identification that lists his ship as an Alderaan cruiser. And
right.
he's able to get it almost instantly. So just small stuff like that. It's like, wow,
Yeah, true.
Luthen
Very
has
true.
access to all this stuff.
Yeah, and Luthen, a Star Wars series. I mean, is that what's gonna? Is that what they're trying to lead us up into? Is
The funny
the
thing,
next spin-off off of a spin-off?
the funny thing about the characters in this show is, I mean, from the get go when they announced Andor what was it, 4 years ago, maybe 3, 4 years
Hmm.
ago. Um, I thought it was a kind of an odd choice, just if I'm being honest. Um, I'm not mad that they made the decision. Um, but having said that, the other characters in the show, like you said, you could almost make the case that they could have their own show too. I think if they were gonna pick any character in this show, it would probably be Mon Mothma
Hmm.
or maybe Saw.
Yeah, yeah.
But honestly, like I think so many of the characters in this show work great as supporting characters,
Hmm.
almost to the point where they become more cared for than the main characters, which is kind of what we've
Right. Yeah.
seen. So
Yeah.
just my
I
two
agree with
cents
that.
on that
No,
on
I
that.
agree. Yeah, and I think they did such a good job casting those characters too. That, and again, no offense to Diego Luna, but man, you got some good actors in this series and
Yeah.
some really powerful scenes with these actors. So it's tough. You obviously we want our Star Wars. We want our stories. We want all the depth we can get. And this is absolutely it. We're getting this wide understanding of the Empire, the Rebellion, but unfortunately, just not about that particular character. So as far as getting a better understanding of the universe, we're getting that, but unfortunately, we at the cost of of Andor himself.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how the season wraps up. I'm hoping we have more more positive thoughts in regard to his character development, and especially after
Hmm.
season 2 when we see him more fully a part of the rebellion. I think we'll hopefully be leaning more in that direction. Um, but I had another quick. I think we played this game once before, but I think we played this game before the final Aldani episode.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm gonna give you a couple names
Hmm.
and not even necessarily alive or dead. I just want you to kind of um, give a quick thought on each one, what
Hmm.
their status will be at the end of
Okay.
episode 12, or what your anticipated um, idea or expectation is for that specific character. First one, Bix.
Okay. Man. So where she ends up? I mean, obviously she's still in a very bad state, and with this only being 2 days away, it's not going to be much better from there if they're going to be continued torturing her. But I mean, they made it very ambiguous, the ending of her scene,
Hmm.
where you don't know where she's going to land as far as answering the question quite yet. But I mean, obviously Krieger was not the person she had introduced to Cassian at this point. So part of me just say no. That's not that's not who I introduced you to. That's an easy answer. But like I said, I don't know if she's in the proper mental state at this point to even have those types of conversations, being able to answer that. That being said, um, at the end of this season, which is this next episode, I mean, unfortunately, I don't see much coming out of her. Because again, like part of me hopes that she is just playing them, that she actually does have proper state of mind. She's like this wizard as far as being able to control herself in these situations, and she'll be the one, like jumping out with a blaster rifle, taking everyone out. So that's what I would love to see. But the reality of it is, I don't know. I don't. Up until this point, there's been no indication that she has that capability, and um, because as far as we know, she's kind of just been running this. I wouldn't even call it kind of like a black market essentially within on Ferrix, where she could bring buyers in to purchase up these this any black market type of item. So unfortunately, I don't see much of happening with her in this episode, the end of this series, end of this season. But I do have high hopes for her. I really liked her character early on, and yeah, it's a shame that she went this way early on. But like you said, this could be the seed that sparks her, rebellion blood. Obviously being tortured by them for feels like a very long time. I don't know where we are in time, but the past couple episodes, it feels like that's all we've been seeing. So, yeah. So to launch her into season 2, if there is a time jump or not, for her to be fully a part of the rebellion,
So she makes it through season 1, you would say.
I would say she makes it through season 1. Yes.
Another one for you. Wouldn't be too mad if this guy didn't make it through season 1. Karn.
Okay.
I I think he will, but if he didn't,
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh darn, sorry, Karn.
Yeah. The, unfortunately, the amount of time they have spent on his character set him up to make it out of season 1.
Yeah.
you know, and not even the amount of time, just the things that they have had him do. Um, I would be the same way as you, to be like, oh well, we don't have to worry about him anymore. But at the same time, I'd be like, what was the point of him at all? So so that's where I'm fighting with myself. Like, I wouldn't mind it, but also like, come on, where were we going with him anyway? So,
Yeah.
I do think he ends up obviously at the funeral. I think he ends up getting in someone's way. I don't know if it'll be the ISB. I don't know if it'll be Cassian himself. He gets in someone's way in an annoying fashion. Will ultimately live out to the season. Um, but he hopefully not very long into season 2.
I've got 2 more names for you.
Yeah.
One of them is someone who we actually didn't see this episode, but we saw in episode 10. The ISB agent Lonnie,
Good one.
the spy.
Does he make it out of the season? Is this the question?
Yeah.
Oh no, Lonnie.
Or is this like the first step of Luthen's like world of control collapsing in on him?
Right, right. Oh man, I don't know, Lonnie. I'm sorry, bud. If I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be this way, but if we're asking the question, we want some. I mean, someone's not going to make it out of here. We know this. He would be perfect in that case, because you saw what he did, and you've seen this before in Rogue One, the first time you meet Cassian, he meets up with a spy, tells him about the defected pilot, and they have a run-in with the stormtroopers, and then he ends up, sacrificing that guy in order for him to get out. I don't know if this is what we'll get with the Lonnie here, where he has served his purpose as far as, because obviously we know that there's this relationship between Lonnie and Luthen over the past few years. It looks like, right? He's been using him in that sense, but I wonder if that character himself has done what he was supposed to do. Not necessarily, obviously Luthen would want him to continue on. I mean, that's what he said the last episode. But do the ISB find out and confront him at the funeral or somewhere, somehow? And that's how, whatever. So if I had to, and here's the thing is that although we had basically we had just been introduced to him the last episode, so he's kind of perfect bait for somebody just to be like, oh well, we met him, now he's gone. Last one in, first one out type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that one I could see going either way. But the last one I have for you, which will certainly be a central point of the finale, is Anto Krieger. Do you think he makes it out of the 12th episode?
I mean, I already mentioned, what if we don't see him at all?
Right.
That is a possibility, because they were looking to, I forget what was their mission. They were trying to rob I forget what planet they were trying to go after. Just a completely different place, right?
Krieger's men's mission.
Yes.
Yeah, I wish I remembered what planet. I don't off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, I have a feeling he will make it through,
Mm-hmm.
only because I think just the nature of TV, like you're led to believe one thing will happen, and then it's good. It's it's captivating. It is exciting when something happens that's not um, following the expectation of the characters, and so
Right.
I think Krieger will survive
Yeah.
through the first season. And I would have kind of been on the same page with you that maybe we won't see him, but I feel like the fact that they showed his face, like is gives me reason to believe that they want us to at least visually know who he is. That way, if we are to see him again, which I think we will, that we're able to like immediately be like, oh, that's Krieger.
Right.
So I think he does, but I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you feel like?
Yeah. I not that I don't know Krieger, so there's no real connection at this point with him. One thing this show has done, and I've mentioned this before, is just bombard us with new characters and names, and I have to kind of care for these people, and then to ultimately just just they're gone. Check out Aldani, by the way. So and the prisoners. So I would not be surprised if, I mean, I will. I was kind of being, tongue in cheek with us just never seeing them, but it would be interesting if they did it that way. That would be a very different way to do this, but to have that separation. So I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say he does not make it out of the season. Again, with the last one in, first one out mentality of just having somebody there, and it would be unfortunate, but it's just too much to, because then you have to go into season 2 knowing that character is there. Although you could have some interest in, well, Luthen left me out there by myself. You could have that whole storyline, which is possible, but I don't, for the overall story, I just don't think we need another mercenary, kind of separatist Saw type of person when we already got Saw.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say that he does not make it out.
Ooh, okay. This will
Yeah.
be something we'll definitely be discussing
Hmm.
in next week's episode, which, by the way, um, will be available much earlier than typically. Our podcasts are made available usually on Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. Central Time. But next week, because it's the finale of the show, we figured we would. We're not entirely sure whether we're gonna watch it as soon as it comes out or wake up really early. But the um, the season 12 finale.
So
Uh,
12.
excuse me, yeah,
Not see.
episode 12. Yeah, season 12. Oh my gosh, can you imagine 12 seasons of Andor? The
it,
episode.
it, it's 12 season, but he only has about an hour full of like screen time. The
Yeah,
entire 12
we're
seasons.
still wondering why Karn's a part of the show.
Oh
Uh,
my god.
the the episode 12 finale, which we'll be covering next week, should be available likely Wednesday late morning, probably around that same 10 a.m. time, maybe a little bit later than that. We're not 100% sure yet, but be on the lookout. It will be available Wednesday next week rather than Thursday. So just a point of note. And then lastly, how did you feel in regards to the grade? If you were to give the grade, episode 11 a grade, what would you give it?
Uh, I'll give it a B minus. You know, it's still Star Wars. I mean, it gave us that Star Wars ending that I liked. But like you said, it was very much a setup episode for the finale, which was everyone. Let's find out. No, everyone has found out about Marva's death, and there's going to be a funeral. Let's all meet up and duke it out. That's just what it feels like. So, nothing new other than that news, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are a couple of things here and there that are intriguing. Like I said, it was the Luthen and Clea conversation. A little bit, you don't know what's going to happen there. Obviously, we saw Krieger in the form of a hollow, and anything with Saw is always interesting, and especially Saw and Luthen, they have some great dialogue together. But as far as moving along the story, nothing really happened a ton. It's always hard for me to give anything Star Wars less than a B minus, but I'll give this a B minus.
I don't know if you and I have had the exact same grade yet on an episode, or whether we've been slightly different every time. But I'm gonna copy your grade for this one.
Oh, I think that might have been the first time. I think you're always a half step above me normally.
I thought about a B, but I didn't. It's all relative. It's all it's all Star Wars, and we love it. And we relish the chance for every episode we get to watch. But yeah, not to echo too much of what you just said, but ultimately it was a setup episode. Not to use the golf analogy again, but the tee has been set. The club has been drawn back, and we're kind of just waiting to see the swing. Hopefully, it's not a whiff. But
I've done
yeah, me too often.
it. I've
um,
chunked it.
yeah. The last thing, which doesn't really pertain too much to Andor, but it's something that could be tied into Andor. Um, this is that crazy theory that I mentioned earlier. At the end of Mandalorian season 2, in the Ahsoka episodes, when she's fighting the Magistrate, she mentions Grand Admiral Thrawn. What are the odds we get Thrawn in Andor? Even though this is like a little bit predating when we're used to seeing him, but I think technically, like canonically, he would be like active
Around.
in
He'd
the
be around for
Imperial
sure.
Navy this time. Yeah, so and then if not Thrawn, then maybe like you said earlier, a reference to the Emperor, or maybe we get to see the Emperor. So that's my crazy hopeful theory for the season finale. We'll see if it comes
Don't
to
don't
fruition.
don't do this to me, man. Don't don't dangle this in front of me, man. No, if I don't know. if there was more of a setup of, calling in some help, or what I mean, like if it was something like that, like, oh, we're not able to handle this section of the universe, or
Yeah.
bring in the closer, give me Vaughn, what I mean, like that would be, that's what would need to happen up until this point.
Yeah.
um but season 2,
Season 2, who knows?
there's a whole other season.
Especially after Ahsoka, which obviously will take place much later. So I don't think there's gonna be a carryover, but one can always
Yeah.
hope.
And I think, and we said this the early days of this podcast, was one of my favorite thing about Star Wars is the now the not even the ability, but the willingness to cross over particular characters into, that exist canonically, at the same time into different series.
Yeah.
When you've got Ahsoka, who had been strictly an animated series character, now in The Mandalorian, now will have her own show. Rumors of possibly having some of the Rebels characters around as well, either in that show and in other shows. Yeah. So, and Mandalorian being Boba Fett, or leading Boba Fett, whatever it was. Um, so so to have at least a possibility, these theories are no longer just completely out there; they are possible now.
Mm-hmm.
Which is what I like, because it can give us hope for if anything else. And if it doesn't happen, it was a fun thought either way. So it does no harm to have, it does no harm to have these theories of Andor and Miro being brother and sister. There's no harm in having Thrawn pop up out of nowhere, or the Emperor, or anyone like that. So I think it's that's one of the fun things about Star Wars, is that although maybe these theories are probably not going to happen, it's always fun to talk about them.
Yeah.
Because even as we were reading that, we were both like, huh, just having those moments is like,
You never know.
interesting.
It could.
Exactly. And Snoke, of course, Snoke being stuck on the prison is
Yeah.
basically where we started here.
Yeah. Origin. The whole purpose of Andor is the Snoke origin story. You heard it. You heard it here first. Yep.
We found it.
We got him. The 12th episode, not season, the 12th episode of Andor premieres next Wednesday at 3 a.m. Eastern, midnight Pacific. Get excited for that. Like I said, we'll be covering it here on the channel, on the podcast, and we are super, super excited to do so. It seems to be set up to be quite the interesting and exciting last episode of season 1 of the show. And so, like I said, we'll be here to cover it. And moving forward with even more Star Wars content, like we said, as we move into 2023, we're looking forward to covering Ahsoka, as well as Bad Batch Season 2 and Mandalorian Season 3. So lots of stuff to be excited for if you're a Star Wars fan. So be on the lookout for that. Also, as we said earlier, the month of December, while there won't be any new Star Wars content coming out, we'll have lots of fun podcast episodes planned for you all. And so, again, be on the lookout for those. You can tweet at us at Hoth Hangout, or email us, hothhangout@gmail.com, if you have any thoughts or ideas or questions that you'd like us to address on the pod. Those are always more than welcome. And yeah, we'll be back again next week with the final episode of Andor. Any thoughts, Joey, before we send it off for this one?
For the greater good.
Well, until then, may the Force be with you. We'll see you in the next one.